So we had left California, came back to Colorado, and I started searching for my next gig, and back in the defense industry, because I had stopped S3F, and at this point I was just kind of a free agent. And that, I would say, was probably around the 22 timeframe. So that's when kind of Ukraine kind of kicked off. And I wasn't really doing a whole lot. And so I started focusing on reporting and helping sourcing of product, just like small product, and connecting dots with people of just like, oh, I know someone here, or I know someone there. And that really kind of started the segue of what I was doing in Ukraine. And then I went to go work for Hardhead Veterans, which solidified more of what I was doing in Ukraine, because I was already sourcing product for units and starting to take like the journalism route a little bit, and bouncing off of Nick from Battles and Beers. And then Hardhead Veterans gave me the avenue of also like, hey, not only are you running our community, but you find sales for us, then you can manage those. And most of my sales ended up being, UKR based. And that really kind of started the kickoff of my addiction of what I guess it is today.
What is Project Leaflet?
What rolled into being Project Leaflet today.
Yeah. So how did you start? I mean, where'd you get the name, and like, what was that first post? Kind of, because I mean, like, the invasion. I mean, everything kind of changed. The evac really set the groundwork, and then Ukraine changed the game.
I didn't have even a plan for Project Leaflet. I think that for me, it was something that I had heard, I had heard about Crimea, and like I had done a little bit of studying in the past, but I think like a lot of people, I hadn't really focused a lot, like too much on it. And I was like, well, that seems kind of fucked up, but
I remember when it happened too. Yeah. 2014.
Yeah. But I didn't really understand a lot because I just wasn't focusing on it. Mm-hmm. And then what really kind of happened was that I had dudes that I knew that had deployed in Iraq, went to go fight with the Kurds. And then that kind of drew down, and then they went to go fight with the Ukrainians. And so some of them had been there in like 16 and 17, and I just kind of knew relationships with some of these dudes, touch base here and there, just saying, hey man, how you doing? And the war kicks off, and so I'm like, oh shit, like, wow, like this is some crazy stuff. And so I immediately, I don't know why, but I just like it became so fascinating to me that I remember hearing the stories and studying when Russia invaded Afghanistan. And so I did some historical just digging on that whole conflict. And I knew about Russia going into the Chechen wars, and I had read some books on that. And so this really kind of like, I guess, piqued my interest in regards to like, okay, well, I know historically some of the background of what RU has done. What's going on with Ukraine? And that kind of like really kind of interests me. Because to me, it seemed like there was a pattern as well. Just like big militaries have patterns. And I started to really dive and report on it on my own personal pages. Just everything that was happening day to day. Anything that I could find, anything that I thought was of interest, reporting on troop movements, how the invasion is going, and reaching out to some of my buddies that were still over there in Ukraine and just asking like, dude, what the is going on? That turned into documenting stories and also requests of supplies. At the time, it was just like, hey man, I'm looking for like socks, and like, can you help me get like the base layer that we used to wear, little square, what the hell were they called? They got
the waffle tops?
Yeah, waffle tops.
Yeah.
And so like trying to find a lot of waffle tops, and like honestly, just like, dude, it was basic shit. Just like getting heat and hand warmers over there. So like when the winter kicks in, these guys aren't like getting frostbite and stuff like that. And then I got to know Nick, and Nick was reporting a lot on the one-on-one stuff, and he had friends that I didn't have friends with, but I had friends he didn't have friends with. And so I guess the dots you could say started to kind of like slowly connect. And then I met a gentleman who was running a company called Project Siren. His name is Patrick. Mm-hmm. Patrick started what I would say is really kind of like the big key for me in Ukraine that got put in the ignition. And he started the Siren chat, which was on signal, and a lot of us were just like guys that were working with each other or had connections and access to stuff. And it was a huge long list of guys that were just operational in Ukraine, or dudes that were support assets, or people that were helping with logistics. And it really kind of built a network of like, okay, wow, there's other people that are doing stuff. Maybe this is something that I can find value in. And that really kind of became the addiction for me for, I would say, the first 2 or 3 months of the war. So much so that my wife hated it. I mean, hated it. I could not let off.
Just on the phone.
Oh, man, yeah, I couldn't. Unhealthy, like, addiction. Yeah, like, because there was so much happening.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was just, it was everywhere you looked. Like, you know, hundreds of helicopters are coming in. Like, they're all going to the airport. You're like, what the hell? Mariupol's fighting. They're surrounded. Like, so it was everywhere you looked. There was something of way. I don't even know the best way of putting it. Like, you know, you go into GWAT and you think you see all this stuff, and then you see what's happening in Ukraine, and you're like, man, I didn't experience all.
Like conventional warfare.
Yeah, like all. Like, you know, I quote that general that did that podcast all the time, where it's like, we saw a lot of combat in GWAT, but we never saw a war. And Ukraine is a fucking war, man.
Yeah, I think that changed forever. I mean, I saw it. I was like, because I remember thinking, oh, the GWAT ended. You know, what two countries will go to war that are, you know what I mean, like conventional? Yeah, like everyone thought it. Everyone thought it was like, all right, well, what, you know, even I remember being the GWAT was like, you know, this 10, 15 years ago, I was like, I don't think we'll ever see a conventional war ever again. You know, because it's like everyone's a trade partner. Everyone talks about China, but it's really China. You really going to go to war with China toe to toe? Like, you know, and then it's like, and then the GWAT ends. You're like, all right, well, that was a real, you know, and then like Ukraine kicks off, and everyone's like, whoa.
Yeah, and you're seeing like SUs like dogfight like above cities at like a couple hundred feet. And you're like,
helicopters like coming in on like, you know, big operator getting shot out of the sky.
Yeah, I mean, there was that famous scene, like it's March, where there's a helicopter over the Dnipro, and you have a fighter jet coming in doing gun runs on it, and you're like, what the is going on? So like that, yeah, man, that
shooting
was
flares. And it was hit. One's like going down.
It just was stuff that I don't think anyone, you know, had really like expected to see it, and it happened so fast. So for me, that addiction, like, and then everyone thought Ukraine was going to fall very quickly. So I think for me, that addiction not only like it grew, but then I was also like, this could end any day. So I gotta stay up on it. And my wife finally was like, okay, well, you're not going to stop doing this. I can tell. If you're going to do something with it, you should probably direct your energy into something or somewhere. So it's not just on your personal Instagram. Because at the time, that's the only thing I was doing I was flooding my Instagram, hundreds of stories and like posts. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll create a company. You know, S3F is dead at this point. I'm kind of not doing much. And I had seen this image on Google that I kind of like formed the first logo of Project Leaflet with, and it was this B-24 that was flying sideways, and it was dropping roses out of it. And I was like, man, that's a cool image. And so I grabbed that image, and I went to an artist, and I was like, hey, I like this concept, but I want to change some stuff around. So we put a whole background of like it flying through like the clouds, and we changed the flowers out to pieces of paper. And I had this idea that, you know, in every conflict, you have forms of propaganda or way of getting information out to the masses that you specifically want them to know. And it doesn't matter if it's true or not. You just want them to know this information. And that's a leaflet. And a leaflet's, you know, it's dropped through bombs or artillery pieces or in the back of airplanes. But it is information that you want the populace to know, regardless of you know what they may feel about it. It's your view on this information. And I was like, man, that's kind of a cool like idea. And so I had another guy that was running a training company called Project Gecko, and that's where how I connected the two. I was like, the leaflet, Project Leaflet. Okay, now I have something here, and that became what it was today. It was just really heavily reporting on OSINT, up to date information on war, global conflicts. We've kind of expanded out of Ukraine, but we still focus very heavily on Ukraine. And most people today, I would say, actually know us for the news and OSINT more than truly what we actually do, which is war supplies, logistics, advising for military units, and problem fixing.